Good to see everybody tonight, and as always, hope our discussion will be beneficial. And as always, y'all feel free to make your comments, chime in as you will. Don't feel like you're interrupting the class. Just feel free to jump in and give us your thoughts on the various things that we're discussing in 1 Peter chapter 3. This one, I guess it was, 2 weeks ago. I guess is the last time we met. We didn't meet last week, did we?
Yeah, singing last.
That's right, singing last week. So we were talking about wives and how they're to conduct themselves, and how the husbands are conducting themselves around the wives, and so forth and so on. And the duty of wives to submit. We talked about the submission part and how in today's world, in today's society in the United States particularly, that's not a very popular discussion. And that's one that, so many people in our country today would not agree with, the submission part and so forth and so on. We talked a little bit about the difference, of course, between males and females. Those of us that got a halfway sense, know that there is a big difference. And we talked a little bit about what the government and others are doing to female sports, and how that they are ruining female sports, that the women had worked for years to try to get some type of equality monetarily and the recognition and so forth and so on. And now they've just totally upset the apple cart, this present administration and the transgender movement and the nuts that are in Washington, D.C. and other places, and even other states, of how that they have treated the females relative to sports. And he's going to talk in just a minute about the reason that there is a big difference. He's going to talk about the fact that women are more feeble, and we got into that discussion just a little bit, I think a couple of weeks ago. But the first 6 verses in 1 Peter 3, he talks about the women and so forth and so on. You wives, be in subjection to your own husbands and so forth. Goes into that about, it's not about the outward appearance and how you look and the plaiting of the hair and the gold and the apparel and so forth and so on, but it's something much deeper than that. He calls it the hidden man of the heart there in verse 4, talking about those things, the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, and that type thing. And then he gives an example of the women in old time, and he gives Sarah as a primary example, calling Abraham Lord. And of course, that wouldn't go over today, but I don't think he's saying that women have to call their husbands Lord, but that they have to realize what the role of the husband is as the head of the family, the head of the household, and so forth and so on. And when he finishes the part about the women, he starts into the aspect of the husband, the male in the family. We're going to talk about that to start with. When he gets through with that part, so he starts out with the women and tells them how to conduct themselves, their relationship to the husband, how that should be, and talking about the subjection and the fact that they are the weaker vessel, which he's going to talk about here a little bit relative to the husbands as well. But not weaker in the sense that she's weaker mentally or she's weaker spiritually or anything like that. But the physical part, I think is what he's talking about there. But then he's going to talk about the husbands and how the husband should dwell with them, how the husband should treat their wife. And then after he gets through that, he gets into, and we'll get into that in just a second, but then in verse 8, then he talks about, finally, be ye all of one mind. So he's talking about everybody. And then he gets down, and then he talks about the characteristics that we ought to have as a Christian and how we should treat each other and what type of conduct we should have toward each other. So that's the last 14 or 15 verses. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about in general how everybody should treat everybody. It talks about being courteous to them, and not the railing for railing and getting back at people and so forth and so on. So that's kind of the gist of what chapter 3 is all about. So when he gets into the part about husbands, he said, likewise, in other words, in like manner that I've just described how the wife should treat the husband, here's the way the husband should treat the wife. So so this is the second part of that chapter as it relates to the husband-wife relationship. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel. And he gives some reasons why. He says, as being heirs together of the grace of life, and that your prayers be not hindered. So when he talks about giving honor unto the wife, one of the reasons for giving honor unto the wife is that she is a weaker vessel. So he gives really three reasons. You give honor to the wife because she's a weaker vessel, that you're heirs together, and that your prayers be not hindered. So he gives three thoughts or three reasons for that. The part about dwelling with them, let your manner of living with them be that which he's already talked about in relationship with the wife toward the husband. And then when he talks about the knowledge aspect of it, that we have a view or an intelligent view of what the relationship ought to be. It's a shame that you got to go into detail about how to treat each other in the relationship when everybody knows just by nature itself what the difference is and what the difference ought to be. But he goes into some detail about that, and he says that part about according to knowledge. Let me just read Albert Barnes' comment just real quick. The meaning evidently is that they should seek to obtain just views of what Christianity enjoins in regard to the relation, and that they should allow those intelligent views to control them in all their conduct and contact with their wives. In other words, what does Christianity say about the relationship? And whatever that is, that knowledge of what a Christian husband ought to be toward the wife and what the wife ought to be toward the husband, that's the conduct that we ought to pursue, the conduct that we ought to give preference to and priority to. And then when he talks about giving honor unto the wife, Barnes goes into some detail about how in most societies and most countries throughout the world that the women are very much in subjection. In other words, it's not anything like it should be as we would expect it to be in the United States. That they, in the pagan world or the world that's not the so-called Christian world, even in our country, it's such a difference that under all these false systems of religion, the women are considered less than the men. You go to Saudi Arabia or look at what's happening in the Middle East particularly. I mean, that's in the news all the time about Saudi Arabia and Jordan and all these other countries, Egypt and so forth and so on, about how they treat the women and how they don't let them go to school, or they make them walk behind them and make them cover themselves and so forth and so on. All you can see is the eyes or whatever. So you see how they're treated. And what Barnes says, in most of the world, it seems like the only reason for women is to gratify a man, the sexual desires of man, or considered almost like a slave, as it were, that they're less than a man. And so he said one of the beauties of Christianity is that they've elevated women and elevated the role of women to the point that it's not like that. In other words, she's on equal footing with man. I mean, you can just see it in our society, even in terms of jobs and things like this. Except, of course, in the church, we understand in the church that there's a difference, not because of her mental inferiority or spiritual inferiority, but because of the way God dictated that she doesn't use her authority over the man and so forth and so on, relative to the preaching and teaching and leading, singing, and first one thing and another. We understand that, but so in the world itself, there's a big difference in the way that women are looked at as opposed to, for example, in our country. Go ahead.
Sir, it's so ironic that the left, and I'm not talking politics, I'm talking about atheism.
Yeah.
National Organization of Women.
Oh, yeah.
They would bemoan Christianity as like it is the ultimate taskmaster system.
Yeah.
When it's completely the opposite.
Exactly.
And ultimately, you know, they will be thrown to the wolves
Yeah.
if their end keeps going the way it is.
Yeah.
You know, communism doesn't have anything to do for favorable of them.
Yeah,
But it's just so weird, ironic that,
it is.
you know, it's the opposite and they don't see it. Now, we understand it,
Yeah.
but they just
Yeah.
don't see that.
Well, even in areas like the transgender thing and the homosexual movement in our country, if the Islamic world took over, they'd be some of the first ones killed.
Right.
And yet it seems like our country wants to promote that, even in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and all those. They hate the homosexuals, they hate the transgenders and all that, and yet we give credence to it and priority to it in our country, not realizing that if they ever took over, it'd be a bad deal for
He was
those
Mao
people.
Zedong, wasn't it? He got rid of all the drug addicts and the homosexuals.
Yeah, exactly. And that would happen here if the Islamic world took over, without question.
It's kind of off the subject, but I saw news the other day, America's come out with a new nuclear submarine. It's going to have men and women on it. It's the first ones they've been like.
Is that right?
They have separate sleeping quarters and showers and everything, designed especially so could be both on there. You know, they've been on ships for
Equal
years.
opportunities.
What this country has done with the woke agenda and all that, even our generals and General Milley and some of these people, what they've done to the military and all is it's unconscionable to me, really. Go ahead, Henry.
But, you know, the fault is, it's all us men. Now,
Yeah.
we're not, these men here, but man
Yeah.
has treated the woman, they leave them with kids, they
Yeah.
run off and, you know.
Abandon them, yeah.
And it caused the women to have to be,
Have to do that,
to have
yep.
to step up because men weren't carrying their roles. You
Yeah.
know how our fathers were.
Yeah.
Why, you know, you said something about my mother, why, my dad.
Yep.
You know, now the husband treats the wife like she's a piece of
Yeah,
meat. And,
yeah.
and then, so she has to be strong, she has to
That's
step
right,
up,
exactly.
and that's what's happened.
Yeah.
We've gone away from our jobs as Christians, well,
No.
that's the only thing about
No doubt
our
about it.
Christian family.
No
You'll
doubt
find
about
that
it.
We're strong men, but the world's not that way anymore.
That's right, exactly right. So in this passage, where it's talking about giving honor, good point, Henry, giving honor unto the wife as the weaker vessel, and some would say it's talking about providing for them, which it does, but it goes even beyond that. You know, the way that you treat them, not just making sure she's fed and making sure she's got clothes to wear and making sure, because what does 1 Timothy 5 verse 8 say? If a man won't provide for his own,
You have to not have faith in this
Yeah.
world.
Point, and
those of his own household,
so many have gone away from that.
Exactly.
And they just don't care.
No doubt about it.
What they are.
no doubt about it.
That was intentionally designed by the Humanist Manifesto to undermine particularly the home. And what they, you know, remember back in the 60s, I wasn't there, of course, but, you know, a rolling stone gathers no moss is what the idea was, and the idea of actual fatherhood, that, you know, that was made fun of.
Anathema, yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
sir.
exactly
So,
right.
Unfortunately, that became a trend.
yeah,
Now we're dealing with the aftermath.
yeah, 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 no doubt about it, yeah. 50, 60 years later, we see
Yeah.
you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind,
That's
you know,
right.
and that's what's happened. So when he talks about the weaker vessel there, that next phrase, in other words, when he says that you dwell with them according to knowledge, give honor to the wife as unto the weaker vessel, as we mentioned, it won't belabor the point, but he's not talking about the fact that she is inferior spiritually. As a matter of fact, because in the next phrase, the next clause, he says, as being heirs together of the grace of life. So we know he's not talking about the spiritual aspect of it, not talking about the mental aspect of it, because I know my wife is a lot smarter than I am. So we're not talking about the mental part, but we're talking about the physical part, just in general, the physical part. And that's very evident when we talked about a while ago, again, not to belabor the point, but in the athletic world, you know, when you see men competing with women, you see the result. It doesn't matter whether it's in swimming, whether it's in any other sport other than possibly gymnastics or something like that. But by and large, the men are stronger. And so when he's talking about the weaker vessel, he's talking about the physical part.
Well,
Yeah.
we've seen in our lifetime how much change is going on. What is this transgender thing gonna do in the future?
Oh, yeah.
If, you know.
It makes you sick.
the
It absolutely makes you
the
sick.
child's not gonna even know what
Exactly.
they are.
Absolutely makes you sick. I've heard of some of them that even when the child is born, they don't determine whether they're male or female until the child gets old enough to decide what he wants to be. I've heard that a while back. So when the child gets 6 or 7 years old, you want to be a male or female. You know, I heard that a while back. So it's just a sad commentary on our country for sure. And then as being heirs together of the grace of life. So the grace here is really talking about, I think, eternal life. He's talking about the grace of life, where they're on equal footing, basically is what he's saying. That she has just as much right as he does. The gospel is for all. The gospel is preached to the females as well as the males, and you go on down the life about that. That Christianity teaches that she is in every way his equal spiritually. She's entitled to all the hopes and dreams and aspirations, promises which religion imparts to him. Same with her. She's just as redeemed as he is. And so I think that's what he's talking about there when you look at that clause as being heirs together of the grace of life. So she has the same privileges and comforts which religion imparts, and she's elevated to the same rank that he is, as it were. Just read a statement. Barnes says that this single truth would raise the female sex everywhere from degradation and check at once half the social ills of the race. So if you looked at it from a spiritual standpoint about how she is just on the same plane as the male, that things would be so much better in the world and so much better between the sexes, the male and female, if we realize that she is an equal partner. But in a lot of the religious world, that unfortunately is not the case. And the reason he gives about giving honor to the wife is that your prayers be not hindered. So the implication is that the prayers could be hindered for some reason or other if there's a lot of, in other words, if she doesn't fulfill her role, the subjection part, and if the male does not fulfill his role to love her and honor her and respect her and so forth that he's talking about here, giving honor to her and so forth as it should be, then your prayers could be hindered. In other words, if there's fussing and fighting and bickering and if that characterizes their living together, where there's turmoil and so forth and so on in the family, what he's saying is, well, you should have a prayer life that is together. Then it's hard to pray when you got those kind of things going on in the family. And I think that's what he's talking about here. So Barnes says this: it's implied that there might be such a way of living as effectually to hinder prayer. This might occur in many ways. If the husband treated the wife unkindly, if he did not show her proper respect and affection, if there were bickerings and jealousies and contentions between them, there could be no hope that acceptable prayer could be offered. So I think that kind of sums up that part. And let me just read just a statement too about Christianity. We kind of mentioned this a while ago, but Barnes mentions this. I thought he made a good point. That Christianity has done much to elevate the female sex. It is taught that woman is an heir of the grace of life as well as man. That while she is inferior in physical vigor, she is his equal in the most important respect. That she is a fellow traveler with him to a higher world, and that in every way she is entitled to all the blessings which redemption confers as much as he is. This single truth has done more than all other things combined to elevate the female sex. And I think that's right when you look at it from a spiritual standpoint, and it's the way it should be spiritually. You can see the result of the harmony and so forth that should be in the marriage relationship.
It's a shame that women today think they have the right, to abort a child if they want
Yep.
to. They can make that decision. It's
Yeah.
their body. They never think twice about the child.
Yeah,
I just can't comprehend.
it's hard to comprehend. It really is.
You know,
I don't have a problem what they do with their own body, it's the other one I have a problem with,
right.
Yeah.
but they don't see it that way.
No, it's completely opposite of what they're saying.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean, it's not what you do to your body, it's what you do to that
it's the other one.
illness. Yeah.
yeah.
But, I mean, if it's not alive, then why do you have to kill it?
And what we've done in this country is, again, it's mind-boggling, and history is going to reflect that down the road, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when people have some type of sanity about something like that, and they write the history of our day and how we let that happen from 1973 to the present. It's not going to bode well for us, Israel, as far as a country.
Especially when eugenics was about keeping
Yeah.
racial, ethnic races
Yeah.
in check,
Yeah,
as per the saying of Margaret
Sanger.
herself.
Yeah. That's right.
And you can watch it on YouTube, she says it.
Oh, yeah, and no doubt about
They
it.
don't know that.
No, they don't.
But
And you never get it on any of the so-called mainstream media. I mean, they never talk about it. So those that don't watch Fox would never know some of those things existed even. Sad deal. And then in verse 8, and so now he's talked about the women. He's talked about in their relationship to their husband. He's talked about the husband relationship that he ought to have to his wife, how to treat her kindly as a weaker vessel, love her, honor her, respect her, and so forth. So then he comes to the word finally. So now he's going to talk about everybody in general. Talks about all of you, basically, and how to treat each other in life. Finally, it's kind of a summation of how to live and conduct ourselves in life. It's kind of a general counsel in reference to your conduct in all relations of life, not just a husband-wife relationship, because he talks about a lot of different aspects here. So he's talking about those things that's important in the life of a Christian and how to live and conduct ourselves and sustain ourselves as Christians in this world. And the first one he starts out with, he's talking about unity as such. Be ye all of one mind. And Barnes says this doesn't occur anywhere else in the New Testament, but it means like-minded, be in harmony with each other, and so forth. Let's read just a couple of verses. Keith, turn, if you would, read Romans 12:16 and Romans 15:5, if you would. So he's talking about being of one mind. The Bible has a lot to say about that. And Israel, turn to 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 10. You might could quote it, but just turn to that and read it here in just a second. Keith, when you get that, Romans 15:5 and 12:16. Either do 12:16 first or 15:5. It doesn't matter.
12:16 says, be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate.
Okay.
Be not wise in your own conceits.
All right. And 15:5, do you have that?
15:5 says, now the God of patience and consolation grant you to be like-minded one toward another, according to Christ Jesus.
Okay. And 1 Corinthians 1:10, is it?
now I beseech you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you.
Okay.
That you be perfectly joined together in the
Same mind,
and in
same
the
spirit. Yep. So he's talking about being on the same page, be of one mind. So how we treat each other and so forth as Christians, to be able to live peaceably with each other and so forth and so on. Don't have a cantankerous spirit toward each other and so forth and so on. And then he goes in a couple of other phrases it kind of backs up what he's saying or adds to what he's saying. Having compassion one of another. In other words, entering into each other's feelings, regard for that other person's welfare. Don't mind just the things of your own life, but mind the things that take into account your brother and the feelings of your brother and so forth and so on, is basically what he's saying here. And then he says, love as brethren. Barnes mentions that in the Greek, it translates it like love the brethren, where it says love as brethren, love the brethren. Basically, is what he's saying there. And Barnes says that doesn't occur anywhere else in the New Testament, but it means having, it means loving one's brethren, loving each other as Christian brethren. Basically, is what he's saying there. And there's many passages that point that out. I won't turn and read it, but Romans 12:10 talks about that. Hebrews 13:1 has a similar thing. And then Jesus told the apostles in John 13:34, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples if you have what, Israel?
Love one for another.
Love one for another. So love is brethren. And so the importance of that. And then the little phrase, be pitiful, some of the translations render that tenderhearted. In Ephesians 4:32, it renders it as tenderhearted. Be pitiful, tenderhearted, and one says courteous. Go ahead, Lloyd.
They got tenderhearted.
Tenderhearted, okay. So be tenderhearted toward each other. Again, talking about the feelings that you have for each other, being in sympathy with somebody else's plight. It's not all about you all the time, and so forth. And then the word courteous in the Greek, it talks about like being friendly minded, or courteous, or being friendly minded or kind. Be of an humble mind, an humble spirit, a lowly spirit, as it were. All of those words would kind of encompass what the word courteous has to do with, and we all understand that, what that entails.
You know,
All right.
about being one mind. William Lincoln said a house divided could not stand.
Can't stand.
I believe
Yeah.
it's Lincoln.
I believe that's right. Yeah, absolutely. House divided itself cannot stand. Absolutely. And that's the way about anything. Athletic team, or you're talking about business, or talking about the church, you're talking about anything. If you have division, and as a matter of fact, in that verse that,
That Lincoln was right.
yeah, and that,
I think Lincoln Coffee tried.
in that verse that Israel was reading a while ago in 1 Corinthians 1:10, that's kind of what he's talking about. What it is, the division and so forth, that you heard that there are divisions among you and so forth and so on. And you're not going to have any success in most anything, any organization or family, whatever the situation might be, if you have bickering and quarreling, and you're not of the same mind and on the same plane and so forth and so on. If you have, that's the reason you talked about the husband-wife relationship a while ago. If you have bickerings and so forth and so on, you don't have the unity that you need even in your prayer life. Go ahead, Henry. I think you got a thought. You got it? Okay.
Brother Lord, remember where Jesus said, if Satan cast out Satan,
Mhm.
that's the context of what he said, a
Yeah.
house divided against itself shall stand.
I just was watching something about Lincoln the other night, and that came up. I was reading,
Yeah.
He was right.
Yeah, exactly right.
he was
Exactly.
talking about keeping the nation as one, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then in verse 9, again, just a general admonition, not rendering evil for evil. And you can look at verses like, Jesus addressed that in Matthew 5 and in the Sermon on the Mount down toward the end, Matthew 5:39 and Matthew 5:44, even loving your enemies and so forth and so on. And in Romans 12, it talks about that. It, is not to render evil for evil, or you render good, you good for evil, good if evil is perpetrated on you, or says railing for railing, and that has to do with he said this about me, and I'm going to say something even worse about him. Railing for railing. He's talking about the conversation, or I guess the mouth there, more than anything else. Was you would say somebody railed on somebody. What did they do? If they railed on them, it was verbal in nature, where you say some really bad things about somebody. So if somebody says something really bad about you, what he's saying is, don't return and say bad things about them. Basically what he's saying, not railing for railing kind of thing. It's hard to do. Kind of goes back to what Jesus said about turning the other cheek. It's easier said than done, but that's what he tells us to do. So he said, not render evil for evil, or railing for railing, but contrariwise, in other words, instead of that, contrariwise. Instead of that, blessing. What did Jesus say about bless them that curse you, do good to them that mistreat you, and so forth and so on? I think one of the statements there is in Matthew 5, down about verse 10 through 12, where he talks about, there's going to be people that's going to speak evil against you falsely, but I say rejoice and be exceeding glad, and all those kind of statements that Jesus made. So, and he says the same thing, but basically Matthew 5:44, where he's talking about bless those that do evil to you, and so forth and so on. And here's the reason why: knowing that you are there unto call, that you or ye should receive a blessing or inherit a blessing. So he's saying that you will be blessed. In other words, if your conduct is right and treat each other right, and Lord had mentioned before, like Doug's prayer about forgiveness, about you're not going to be forgiven if you don't forgive others, so on and so on. It's kind of the same principle here. He says that if you, instead of railing on people and treating people evil for evil, you're going to, but you bless them or you do good to them that mistreat you. He says that you will inherit a blessing. In other words, we're called to be Christians. We're called to be different from the world. And so what he's saying is that you can expect a blessing. If you scatter blessings to others, it will return to you, as basically, I think, is what he's saying there. All right. Any thoughts as we get into verse 10?
Yeah, I sure it might have been Paul that it may have been Romans, but talking something similar to that. If somebody does something to you or says something to you, and you say something good back to them, it heaps coals of fire upon their head.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's one of the reasons for doing that, isn't it? That you're going, in other words, if you treat them well, that they've mistreated you, that's one of the side benefits or the side effects, that they'll be ashamed that they treated you that way, and you heap coals of fire on their head. They'd be sorry that they said what they did. They'd be sorry that they treated you that way as well. And in a lot of cases, that's the way that it is. It's kind of a general principle. Absolutely. All right. And the next part is a beautiful verse. As a matter of fact, this verse, for he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips that they speak no guile, and so forth. This comes from an Old Testament passage in Psalm 34. Lloyd, could you get Psalm 34 on your... read, if you would, Psalm 34, because it's so similar, and I don't know if it actually came from this or not, but in all likelihood it did. But Psalm 34, verses 12 to 16, if you would.
12 through 16.
Yeah.
What man is he that desireth life and loveth many days, that he may see good? Keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile. Depart from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it. Through 16, was it?
Yeah, through 16.
The eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears are open unto their cry. The face of the Lord is against them that do evil, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth.
Okay. So you see what he's saying here in 1 Peter 3 in verse 10, and it actually goes all the way through verse 12, because it's almost the exact quote of what Lloyd just read. So let me just read all that. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, his lips that they speak no guile. Let him eschew evil and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it. For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. So it's very similar to what Lloyd just read in Psalm 34, almost a direct quote, Psalm 34, 12 through 16, there in 1 Peter 3, 10 through 12. So what he's saying is, it's okay to love life. In other words, if you love life, and it's okay to want to live a long time. So he's not condemning that. He that will love life, see good days, and so forth and so on. And you can do a lot of good the longer you live. If you conduct yourself right, the more good you can do, and so forth. All of that is implied or inferred in that statement. So if we want to live a long time, and if we love life and have a proper life, matter of fact, Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. and so forth. And if those things are important to us, here's the way to do it. And if we live a long time, we can do good to other people. We can have influence on other people, and we can have more time to prepare for eternity. And I've often wondered. I was mentioning this to Elaine a while back. It's just to me, and I'm not God. I'm not God's dad. I'm not questioning God at all. But sometimes I wonder why some of the rascals and scoundrels live so long, and then you got a wonderful person, a wonderful husband, father, a girl like that one in Georgia that was killed, 22 years old, Laken Riley. And you got so many people that could contribute so much to our country, so much to society, and something bad happens to them. And then you got a George Soros, so you got people like that they live in their 90s. You know, you can't get rid of them. I mean, they're just there and creating so much havoc and so much problem. Matter of fact, you know, when Joe's so-called friends were questioning him, he said, and of course they had it all wrong, but Job said, well, I see these people that are real evil living a long time, and they were questioning him and about what was happening to him. Well, nobody, if you're doing right and so forth and so on, you know, this is not going to happen to you. But what he said is, well, why have all these other people that I see living a long time and don't have any regard for God and don't have any interest in spiritual things? He said, I see that all the time. That's what Job was saying, and we see it too. You know, in our country and throughout the world, there's some of these real scoundrels that God permits them to live. And so Lane said, well, it could be that they are given more and more days, more and more opportunities to get their life straight. You know, could be. I don't know. I'm not.
Doesn't seem like very many of them do.
Yeah, not many of them do. So, but God allows it, and we're not questioning God, but I just wish sometimes it was the other way around, that those kind of people don't want to wish harm on people, but if those people were not alive, the world would be so much better off without them. And these other people that are cut down in the prime of life, that's got so much to contribute to society, it'd be good if it was reversed, you know.
It's that verse where the tower fell on these people and Christ says, do you think these were more wicked than
Yeah.
others or something?
Yeah.
They weren't.
Yeah.
With the towers.
Yeah, Luke 13.
1,
Yeah.
or 2.
Yeah,
Just, you know, they're victim
Yeah.
of circumstance. They
That's
allowed
right.
to be there.
yeah. Well, it's a verse that I like all the time, and I know Keith and I referred to it several times. I think it's Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 11, which says that time and chance happeneth to them all.
Right.
In other words, the battle doesn't always go to the strong, and the race doesn't always go to the swift, and it has 2 or 3 statements in there, but it's the time and chance happening to them all. So sometimes it's just a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or, you
There
know,
was a wicked king, I think it was Manasseh.
live 55 years, 52 years. Yeah,
But he repented toward the end of his life, if
Yeah.
I understand
Yeah.
correctly.
yeah.
But I mean,
That could be part of it, that
just like
God's giving you a chance.
long suffering of God.
Yeah, kind of like he waited in the days of Noah, gave him 120 years to get themselves right, you know. So, all right, and then and see good days. In other words, love as many days that you may see good and so forth. Good days, happy days, days of usefulness, prosperous days. And here's a way to do it: refrain your tongue from evil. And a lot is said about this, of course, in James. James chapter 1, verse 26 is a reference. Also, James chapter 3 and verse 2, the first several verses there in James chapter 3. So refrain our tongue from evil, doing evil to no one, seeking the good of all. So avoid slander and falsehood, and profaneness, obscenity, and uttering erroneous and false opinions, and so forth and so on, like these people calling Trump a dictator and Hitler and threat to democracy and on and on and on, the kind of things, the kind of rhetoric that's going to get him killed if we're not careful. So what he's saying is refrain your tongue from evil, and also the lips is to speak no guile. In other words, there's no deceit. You know, that's what's said about Jesus. There's no guile or no deceit found in his mouth. And what he's saying is we ought to conduct ourselves the same way, that that we speak truthfully and we don't slander people. We don't come back at people and so forth and so on.
Coach, it's like Ephesians 4:29.
Okay.
Let no corrupt communication proceed
Proceed
out of your mouth.
Yep. Good
That
save.
which is good to the use of edifying.
That's right. That's good. Excellent verse. Excellent verse. All right. And in verse 11, so let him eschew evil. In other words, get rid of it, avoid all evil. Matter of fact, in 1 Thessalonians 5:22, it even says to abstain from the appearance of evil. So here you're saying stay away from it, avoid it. So instead of, so you avoid evil, and then he says in a positive way, and do good, in any and every way that we can, by endeavoring to promote the happiness of all, as we have opportunity, Galatians 6:10, let us do good to all men, especially those of the household of faith. So do good, 1 Peter 3 and verse 11, and let him seek peace. In other words, he's already talked about not having railing for railing and all the strife and so forth, the bickering and so forth. Let him seek peace. In other words, follow those things that make for peace. If it be possible, live peaceably with all men. I think that's Romans 12:18, isn't it? I think. So, and also, Jesus said something about that, about the peacemakers there in Matthew 5 and verse 9, didn't he? That blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called the children of God, I think. I think the second part, I did look that up. So, what he's saying is have a peaceful spirit, and that will contribute to your length of days. You want to live a long life, you want to have a happy life. Here's one way to do it. Stay away from bad things, avoid evil, do good to people, seek peace, be a peacemaker, ensue it or pursue it. And then in verse 12, and kind of the last part of what Lloyd was reading there a while ago, that the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, the ears open to their prayers. And he says basically the same thing here, there in verse 12, the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous. He's their protector. We talk about the providence of God a lot and so forth. And his ears open to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. And you can have many of the references to that, of those two contrasting statements. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate your good comments and good attention. And we'll take up there verse 12 next week. Thank you very much.
Enjoy it.